Hey friends, it's Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rachel Terry and I am the author of 3 young adult fantasy books. Information will be in the description box down below if you're interested. Ironically, young adult fantasy is going to be the topic of today's video and why I, as an author, am going to be leaving it behind. This is something that I always sort of planned to do eventually, but I didn't really foresee it happening in this way specifically. Let me explain what I mean. So, as you probably already know from the intro if nothing else, all of the books that I've published up until this point have been in the young adult fantasy category, and I do plan to publish at least one more young adult fantasy book. That is my 4th upcoming book, which I hope to have out this fall, and it is the companion prequel sequel to The Phoenix and the Crown that you can see behind me. And because The Phoenix and the Crown is in the young adult category, it makes sense for its companion novel to also be in the same category. I also have an idea for 2 potential prequels to the Guardians Duology. Each of those books is going to focus on a specific character from the original series, and those books have never existed before, so I don't want to commit and say for certain that they're happening, but if they ever become more than just a vague idea in my head, they will also be in the young adult category because the original duology is in that category. Now, I just want to say that I don't regret writing any of these books in the young adult category, particularly the Guardians Duology. It's a coming-of-age story. It's very much that kind of young adult book, and it needs to be written in that category. And this is one of the things that frustrates me when I see a reader who didn't like the book, because it's very clear sometimes that they didn't like it because they just didn't get what I was trying to do with that book. Particularly people who tell me that they think Sarah has no personality. Sarah is 17 years old. She's trying to figure out who she wants to be, what her place in the world is, and what she wants her place in the world to be. And that's a very difficult thing to figure out, particularly when you're in your teenage years, and sometimes those questions persist beyond that into adulthood. I'm in my 20s and I feel like I'm still dealing with those issues. I just happen to deal with them later in life. But it's frustrating because it's the perfect sort of coming-of-age young adult story that you want, and I just feel like people don't get it. So I'm going to go into the reasons why I'm going to be saying goodbye to young adult as the genre that I'm going to be writing. I have 3 main reasons why this is. The first reason that I'm going to be abandoning YA as a genre is by no means the most important, but it is a factor, and that is the decline of YA as a genre category. This is something that I feel like has happened quite recently. I feel like only a handful of years ago, right before I published Lightbringer, YA was incredibly popular. There were so many new books that were coming out a year and it was making a ton of money, and I think it got kind of oversaturated, to be honest, and I missed it by that much. In my opinion, another reason why this is sort of on the decline is because I don't think the same target audiences are there for these books anymore. Aside from the oversaturation, I do think with the rise of spice, that is something that negatively impacts both YA and middle grade. I think middle grade is in a worse place than YA, and I'm not trying to suggest that every single young person out there is reaching for spice, because that's not true, but I do know for a fact that there has been a rise in demand for these kinds of stories, and the readers that go after them do so very voraciously. Spice is not something that is generally accepted in YA, and certainly not in middle grade. The only audience that is appropriate for that kind of content is adult books, and spice has been trying to sneak its way into YA for years. This is nothing new, and I personally don't think that spice belongs in YA. Some of the people who think it's fine will counter by saying that if you don't think teenagers are out here engaging in this kind of behavior, you're just in denial, you're not willing to portray healthy teenage relationships, and you're shaming. I'm not denying that teenagers are out here engaging in this kind of content or behavior, but if you're going to include it in your book, you need to pay very close attention and be careful with how it's portrayed. I think that if that kind of content is going to be in YA, it should be closed door or fade to black romance, and it should not be explicit. And then it's not really spicy. The whole point of spicy content is to be as explicit as possible and go into graphic detail, and that does not belong in YA, and it certainly doesn't belong in middle grade. However, that does not mean that young audience readers who are looking for that kind of content won't manage to find it. And I'm sure maybe you've seen these TikToks of 5th grade teachers in particular talking about how their students come in with copies of Icebreaker, which is a very smutty book. They will find this kind of content if they want to, and if this is what they want to read, then they're not going to be reaching for books like Percy Jackson or Harry Potter anymore. And I think that that's unfortunate, but it's just a symptom of what's going on a broader scale right now. The second reason is one that I've come to terms with more recently, and that is the category definition of young adult. Technically speaking, young adult books are only for the audience range of 13 to 18. And I have a big problem with that. I think maybe this is a category that needs to have an overhaul, because the kind of book that would appeal to a 13-year-old is very different from the kind of book that would appeal to an 18-year-old. They're going to deal with vastly different things. A 13-year-old is barely a teenager, has just come out of the tween stage of things, if that even still exists in today's society. And an 18-year-old is on the cusp of adulthood. I mean, technically you are a legal adult when you hit age 18. For me, I always considered young adult to technically, in my mind, be 13 to 25, which is an even bigger and more ridiculous age group. But the main group that I had in mind for my books was 16 to 25. Again, still a big group, but when you say young adult, if you're technically not an adult until you're 18, in my mind, a young adult is an 18 to 25-year-old. And that, I suppose, is the sweet spot of the audience that I was writing for. But the technical definition of YA says I'm writing for 13 to 18-year-olds, which I'm definitely not. I consider each of my young adult books to be upper YA, and I kind of wonder sometimes if The Phoenix and the Crown would have been better received even if it wasn't YA. It's borderline YA NA anyway, because the characters are on the cusp of older, maybe too old for YA, but it is what it is. I don't like this target audience age range. It's not who I want to be writing for. It's not who I'm trying to target with my books. And if that is the case, it might make sense why we're where we are, why we're seeing the results that we're seeing. However, on the other hand, it has been proven that over half of the audience that actually reads young adult are like over 25. So at least half, if not more, of the audience for YA are actually adults, and I think that has something to do with the push to include spice in YA. Most of the readers are adults, they want spice, and that means that they want spice in YA as well. And knowing that over half of the audience is adults, this was another thing that I was keeping in mind when I was writing my books the way that I was writing them. So right now I essentially just feel like I'm caught out at no man's land, and I'm not sure who my books are really for. I just know that they're not for 13-year-olds. I don't want a 13-year-old reading the book. That's not to say that you can't have a higher reading level than the age that you are or the class that you're in, and that you can't handle more mature content. Every 13-year-old is different, but in general, that's not the audience that I'm writing for. And that brings me to the third point, the audience. Who am I writing these books for? With book 5, this is going to be my first adult epic fantasy. That's what I'm calling it. Whether other people think it's epic or not, who knows? We'll get into that when we get there. But this is going to be my first adult fantasy. I did come up with ideas that were always adult fantasies and meant to be adult fantasies, but it's interesting because this book 5 used to be YA. I considered it, along with The Phoenix and the Crown and Lightbringer, to be my big 3 YA fantasy books, and in this latest rewrite, the newest final iteration of this story, is not YA anymore. It's adult. I just decided to up the age of the characters and make the themes more mature and more darker. I will probably go into what adult books mean for me when this book comes out. I'll probably reiterate this. Just because a book is adult for me does not mean you have to worry about explicit content or any of the things that I've not included in my YA books up until this point that maybe you don't want to read and that you want to avoid. You don't have to worry about any of that sneaking in just because it's adult. And I do think that while this book could have worked as a YA book, I just decided not to even risk it, not to even bother. I think that YA can be dark and deal with dark themes, which this book is definitely that. It's my darkest book, I think, that I've ever written. And I always go back to The Hunger Games. The Hunger Games are completely very dark, and this book is kind of like The Hunger Games, vaguely, in terms of you have an evil government and you have people who become rebels and rise up against it. That's basically as far as that comparison goes. But The Hunger Games is very dark and it is YA, and I think that YA can be dark and that the readers can handle it. But I just decided not to even bother with that and just up it to adult. And the reason for this is that I want to write for a more mature audience. It's my hope that if I can state that these books are adult, that maybe the audience that picks them up and that reaches for them initially in the first place will get it, because I feel like I've struggled, at least so far, to get my books in the hands of the readers that they're meant for. Part of that is if you offer a book for free, it doesn't matter if somebody hates the genre, they're going to grab it because it's free. I would never do this, but a lot of people do. And then when they inevitably hate it because it's not their genre, they get mad about it. But I would just like to think that maybe if I state that these books are adult, that I'll get a more mature audience. I want people to think critically. I want them to ideally get what I'm trying to say or convey with these stories. I know that that's not going to happen for everybody. I just want these books to get into the hands of the readers that they're meant for. And with Lightbringer being a coming of age story about like finding who you are, especially in the aftermath of a tragic loss, it definitely had to be YA. And like I said, I don't regret making that YA, but the fact that people don't get it, I don't know. I don't know if this will solve any of the problems. I don't know if I will succeed in getting my books into the hands of the right readers or the people that would enjoy them. I don't know if this will help with that at all. But I do feel like it's the right thing to do for my career. I had such fun rewriting this last fantasy book as an adult fantasy, and I just really look forward to where we go from here. So there you have it. Those are my reasons for leaving YA behind as an author. I won't ever say never. Like, I'm not going to say that I'll never write YA again. As I said, I will have at least one for sure that it is in the YA audience category. And I'll never say never. Who knows what will happen in the future, but for now, this is the turn that it looks like my writing career is going to take. I had planned on this happening, as I said in the beginning. I had plans for adult fantasies that I just haven't gotten around to writing yet, because unlike these books, they haven't existed for 13 years since the first draft, and even longer now as we go on. They haven't existed that long, but I did plan to write them. I just hadn't planned on transitioning into the adult fantasy category so soon. But I'm excited to see where this change takes me. I hope you guys are excited as well and that you'll stick around and we can go on this journey together. So there you have it. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. My name is Rachel Terry. I am the author of 3 young adult fantasy books, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!